Welcome to part 2 of the 2.7 million passive property portfolio. In this pod, we're going to share so much, Sam. I'm Jaryd Krause, the co-host of Property Pals Australia.
I'm Sam Powell, the other guy. And we had a part 1. So if you haven't heard that, that's the whole, inputs and the preface behind this part 2. So definitely jump into that one first. But in this one, we break down what it actually means for you at the end of a 30-year period. Just in general, obviously we talk about running 2 different strategies. There's the principal place of residence, paying that one down over a 30-year period, or actually getting your money to work for you. And what would that actually mean to your overall net wealth after a 30-year period? And some pretty big numbers that hopefully can maybe change your mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also just a passive approach. Those 2 models that we ran, Sam, is a passive approach. We sort of allude to what it would look like if it was an active approach. And I share a story about a couple that I met that's doing some rent vesting, living on the Gold Coast and investing in property in Australia, and how well they're doing because of that. And they're only in their mid-30s, and what you guys can do as well. So such a valuable pod. Enjoy. Welcome to Property Pals, the podcast where we share everything around how to build a property portfolio, from researching areas, financing, structuring, buying, selling, and reinvesting to live a life of financial independence. As a disclaimer, any information shared by myself, Jaryd, Sam, and the Property Pals team is strictly general and should not be taken as constituting professional advice. You should consider seeking independent legal, financial, and taxation advice from a qualified professional. Scenario, model number 2, buying 3 properties in a 10-year period. And you're using equity. Yeah, you might, for the first year of both those investment properties, you need to have a little bit more cash for them to pay off debts and stuff like that. Also, though, over a 10-year period or even a 5-year period, this is not using any money that you've saved. So this is pretty basic, and you could buy, say you're saving 10 grand a year, that's 50 grand in year 5 that could go towards a deposit, and you take less equity out, right?
Yeah.
And more if you can save more, and you can accelerate this so much faster. Obviously, we've talked to people who have bought 10 properties in 10 years, and it's going pretty fast because they're a bit more aggressive. But I think it's very achievable for somebody with 115 grand to start off buying, one, and then moving on to another 5 years later.
Yeah, and that's why everyone says, or everyone in my space, is the hardest part is getting that deposit.
Yes.
And then the second most important part is having a savings acumen. So you're putting money away and not getting shiny ball syndrome. The second is making sure the first property you purchase is a good one. And that's owner occupier, or if you want to go the rent vesting path, because one, you see the effects of it and what it can do for you, and how much easier it is to watch your assets appreciate in value as opposed to going to work every day for it. But the other reason is if you don't get that appreciation, then you can't draw down on equity as fast, and you won't get the rental increases as fast either. So that's where a lot of people do in the past. Now's a different story. There's a lot of data and information out there to obviously get that slight alpha. But yeah, that's where most people go wrong. And then the barbecue chats, where I had an investment property, did nothing. My parents, it's probably one of the reasons I've mentioned a couple of times, got into this space, is they did well initially, but there was one that really, shot them in the foot. They were lucky enough it was their last one. They got greedy. My mum got greedy. If she's listening to this, she was like, if we have 10 properties, Kez, and we could we'll be millionaires. And in hindsight, it all works out anyway. But they could have been a little bit better off with not having that asset, because it was house and land package in Coomera, and there was about 1,000 lot subdivision around it, and it did nothing for a good was a good 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happened. And that does financially hamstring you, you know.
Yeah.
But then this is the other point too. We'll touch on when we get to the numbers too, because it's like inflation adjusted is really important. Like I was looking at the figures and I was like, damn. And I've run the model too, just sort of outline that inflation adjusted, so you can see the difference in your today's dollars essentially, because
That's
you
perfect.
don't think about it, like the holding costs. Just as an example, for that principal place of residence, as an example, the holding costs are put in at 0.8% of 500,000, which sits at $4,000 a year. So that's pretty standard. You know, rates $1,500, water $500, insurance $1,000, and then $1,000 for maintenance, like basic.
Yeah.
But if you're doing that and it's compounding at 3% over a 30-year period, you know, your holding costs are coming up to like $30,000 at the end of that 30-year period.
Yeah.
And people are sitting there, and I was just sitting there going like, and that's probably why, because wages don't keep up with
Inflation.
asset price growth, or even, I mean, inflation in a way, depends on where you work, but that's the big issue. And I do see that, like, if you're not on that property ladder, like, you know, imagine like 30 grand in like just to hold a property, and you're retired and you're dishing out 30K. Like, I guess 30K in 30 years would probably be more like, obviously it's $4,000 you'd hope today.
$4,000 a year. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, you can see where it heads.
It's all relevant. It's all relevant. The funny thing that I see when people buy a PPOR is, buy it, do a renovation, and then in 5 years' time, they're like, yeah, that renovation helped the property grow, like the property price so much. I'm like, did it really? Or is it just is it just the area because you bought in a good area? Like, maybe it can to a certain extent, but like, what's your thoughts on that?
Depends on the market cycle in that area, to be fair. And in low supply markets, like, and what price point you're playing in, there's a couple of key elements, because I run my own feasibilities on, like, if I do a reno on, is it worth it? Very rarely is it worth it. Like, you go and and we all know doing renovations, you budget 50 grand, it's going to blow to 70, pretty, like, 20%.
This is typically without people factoring in their time.
Exactly.
And that is the killer. That's the main killer, because that time could be spent thinking about how do you better your position financially, or time spent with your family. Like, but you think you're building wealth and building something for yourself and your family, when it's not really going to result to a big ROI at the end of the day.
Yeah, like it can, and I think if you're strategic about it, and that's where, like, the renovation schools can give a lot of value. But yeah, especially as an occupier and you're renovating it to live in it, you're all like, "I'll chuck a fire pit in. I'll put an in-ground pool. I'll do this," and I just need to get this big fence and then the carport and blah blah blah. Like, it goes on and on. But like, in the current market anyway, there's no real profit in doing a sort of renovation, I believe. Like, yes, there's profit, but you could just go and, as I said, get a second job, work on a weekend, which you're doing anyway,
and let the market do the work.
It works for builders and stuff like that, because they write off materials through their business into their PPORs. That's where, like, strategy, obviously not financial advice ever, but when I'm talking to people about their strategies, like, what's your skill set? What do you like doing? Because some people, like even for myself, sit in the office most days. I don't mind getting out there and just digging a hole every now and then, getting a bit of a sweat up. Do I want to do it for a career? Hell no. That's tough. But to each their own, kind of thing.
So throw some numbers at us now. The rest of the numbers for these.
Yeah, we dragged you on a laugh. Look at us go in this, this podcast space. All right, let's run a couple of figures here. So, At the end of a 30-year period, I'll run both scenarios. So, which is pretty interesting stuff. So, for scenario one, at the end of the 30-year period, you put 100 grand in, well done, 500,000 on property, well, fantastic. Pay that all off. And it is costing your now portfolio value is $2,709,000. So let's round it $2,710,000.
Yeah, with the 6% conservative 6% growth rate. Yep.
Yeah. 6% growth rate per annum. So obviously at that period, your debt position is zero, so it's the same, 2.71.
2.71, yeah, cash.
Yeah.
Or net wealth for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty strong. The interesting part, like I said 30 grand before, but obviously I was wrong. But the cash flow position at that 30-year period is negative $21,673.
Okay. Yeah.
So I guess not 30 grand, so I overestimate on that one.
I mean, it's hard to really know what the inflation's going to be throughout those 30 years.
Well, yeah, I just factored in a 3% inflation rate on holding costs.
Yeah.
So
there's 2.71 with a 20 grand holding cost. Okay.
Yeah. So obviously you still got to figure out how to pay that. Obviously you'd be I'm assuming you've got super, or you have to be, this is what I mean, you have to be invested, and this is where a lot of business owners go wrong, is they focus on the business and generating income
and never pull anything off the table. Yeah, I mean, that's what I did at the start with my business. I was just like, that's why I'm in property now, because I'm like I've spent so much money and just thought I was going to be a gazillionaire and whatever.
Yeah, you got to factor it in. So that's scenario one. So overall, like, once again, the alternative is like you could rent forever, and if you don't invest, you got nothing at that stage. So and with the double down on that too. It's a good position to be in, because with like pensions and things, which I'm assuming they'll still be around in 30 years' time, like your principal place of residence, once again, assuming that's not counted in your I guess calculation from the ATO. You'll get a pension essentially, and then you can do it, equity drawdowns on, or like different transition to retirement strategies, but basically you can live off the cow essentially. So there's companies out there that essentially go, oh well, your house is worth X, you've got 30 years to live, we'll give you the money, and when you die, we'll have X percentage ownership over your property, and you get to live your life. And doubling down on that is like, that's why you need to buy at least something.
That's why, because then you've at least got the cow. But you also would like this next scenario that you're going to mention is like, what if you just invest in like one other one, and it might be 10 years later, or another one, two, within a 10-year period, and then how much cash do you have left over to like pay for the expenses for the houses and live off without even touching your retirement, like your super. So let's go through those figures.
Yeah, you got another scenario which I'll have to run another time, but because the scenario two, simple. And if you want access to this sort of stuff, obviously just reach out, put a comment, or jump on the website propertypals.au for just AU, and follow your nose, just contacts. And obviously, we never say it enough, but like questions, comments, obviously definitely helps us and the channel grow, and just keen to sort of give value where we can. That's the whole idea here. Scenario two, which is an interesting one. So the total portfolio value at the 30-year period is a whopping, do you want to take a guess?
16?
No, shit, that's right. That's a lot, mate. No, it's 6,246,000. So round up, say call it 6.25 million.
6.25, okay.
Obviously, because we had those, like the principal place of residence loan is paid down after that 30-year period, but there's still the debt
too.
Yeah, so you're still carrying roughly 800K in debt.
Yeah,
So
400K property roughly. Yep.
Yep. And so the net capital value after debt is 5,446,000.
Wow.
So
5.46. Okay.
yeah, so this is the and the cash flow position is negative $6,814 a year, and then people are like, oh, well, how can that be less? It's because you got rental income that's actually working for you, so it's paying off a lot of those holding costs of the principal place of residence and the current, because you've got a 20-year holding period essentially.
Yeah.
And you're getting growth. Rental growth is, I just kept it in line with inflation at 3%. So it's interesting conversation there. Now, people sit there and go, oh, well, geez, my life's so hard. I was still in negative cash flow. And this is where my mind was going for another scenario where it's like, just sell bloody one of them,
Yeah, that's right.
If you divide that by 3, or like say your debt, you'd be selling one for over $1 million, and then you just live off that.
Just sell the last one that you bought, or one of them. But the thing is, you've just this is why I think like the more like the debt millionaire, the book, and buying these assets with like the more debt you have, the more properties you're securing at that price range that you buy it at, and then inflation is growing, and then so your debt stays the same, but your rental income increases and the property value increases. And so over a 20-year period or even a 10-year period, that asset's looking very, very good, no matter if you did a 80% LVR on it, or a 90% LVR on it. That's still, you're still in a really good position to be able to like, cool, that I could sell that and then reinvest some of that cash somewhere else and then use some for, living off if you're, nearing retirement. You've just got, you've got more debt. You've secured more property that's going to grow because of inflation.
Yeah.
And you
and also like, $400,000 a day is a lot of money, but in 30 years time, $400,000 isn't that much.
No.
Just like, I mean, think about it. People are buying properties in the 60s or 70s for like $18,000, and now it's
$15K for it, and you're like, what? That place in Mermaid Beach went for 22K. Yeah, it was expensive at that time because it was on the beach, but now it's worth 5.7 mil.
Yeah, so to break it down to sort of finish it off, it's like, what's the difference in taking those different options? Like you'll be in lifestyle, you'll be taking a little bit more of a haircut. You're investing in your future by circa $10,000 per property per year. But the end difference, so like say you're doing that's 300K. What's that? 10-year period. Like
what mass are you doing?
I'm just like, it's like you're holding, you're putting that money in to work for you, and you're investing in it.
Yeah.
So if you got because obviously they're bought at different times. One's at 10 years, one's at 5. But obviously you've got to factor in that holding cost as well that you're investing. But the difference is the end result is the cash flow position is $14,800 difference at the end of that 30-year period, because you don't have that big negative cash flow hold on your principal place of residence.
Yeah,
but
your holding cost is halved.
Yeah, and then the biggest one is like, you've got your net capital after is $2.737 million in difference at the end of the 30-year period.
Difference. So you've got an extra 2.7. So what was it, 5.4 or something?
Yeah, 5.446, and then the other one was 2.709. So you obviously take away from each other from the net figure.
Yeah,
$2.7 million in difference. It's
what would it be worth to have an extra 2.7 after a 30-year period for sacrificing a little bit along the way?
Yeah, and there's like, once again, there's always different elements to it. Like, if you sell those investment properties, you're going to have 3% selling costs, capital gains tax. I get it. You can also buy things in trusts and transfer it to your family, but we haven't even touched on like an active strategy where you're buying in growth locations, getting that alpha over a 10-year period, selling down, and then getting out of that standard sort of 5% growth rate.
That is such a good point, because this is such a passive route. Like to buy 3 properties in 10 years is a very, I mean, when you're starting with 100K or 115K, it's very easy to do, very easy. And it's very, very passive. I mean, you're literally sitting around doing nothing for 20 years and it's doing all the work for you,
Yeah, and if you're a share person, you listen to this, or you're ahhing, diversify. And I think that's really important too, is but even I've got to think about too with shares, you got to, like on a 6% interest rate, you pretty much got to be getting growth rates around 9%.
Yeah,
because you got to pay tax on that as well as you grow. So it's interesting model.
It's very interesting. If you're between 30 years old and you do run that passive strategy for 30 years, you're 60, and that's where your position is at. You do it at 40 and you're 70, and that's where your position is at. And that's passive. Like, we're not talking about selling, those 2 investment properties 5 years after and then reallocating that cash to a higher growth location. We're not talking about opportunity costs, because there's a lot of opportunity costs lost in how passive both those models are.
Yeah, and the holding cost too, like yes, it's $10,000 initially. It's always the biggest hurt in the first 5 years, and then it goes away. So it's not like you're carrying 10 grand every single year for 20 to 25 years on that scenario too.
Yeah,
it changes. Yes, it's a pain in the ass. Trust me, like you and I are going through it. I could go and maybe fly business class, or I could go and buy that jet ski or whatever you want to piss your money up against the wall. But it's what it actually does is it forces you to have like a savings plan at the very least, and it is you own properties. Those that do, it's pretty passive. You might get tenant turnover once every couple of years. There's a few things that are broken, but like my property managers, hey, this is broken, needs fixing. All right, we send a tradesman out, go and fix it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a part of, you factor that cost into maintenance. To even consider like, can I get it cheaper, or should we do that fixing? Should we not do that fixing? Each time that goes through my head, I'm like, what am I thinking about? Why am I trying to, skimp money on maintenance that needs to be done anyway? Just say yes to everything they do and want to do. And you don't have to stress about it. And the fact that once you've got like 2 properties, even one, and it's an investment, so say it's not outside, because I don't have a prime place of residence, but like the fact once you have one and you start to see the value in it, it's huge, because then you go, okay, what if I had like the compounding of like 2 or 3 or 4, and what would that look like in 15 years time? It's wild to think.
Yeah, and that's where it goes down to, is like, that's why you need to just have a conversation with a property strategist, and like by doing it with different people, it gives you the right things to think about. Like, are you in a relationship? Do you want a relationship? Do you want to have kids? Like, is most, like, we modeled it out in our previous episode. I'm not sure what number it was. It was probably at least a year ago, but the difference between total return on investment is far in favour of the rent vesting strategy or the owner occupier plus investing strategy. Like, if you're just going PPOR, I don't care if you're renovating or not. It's just you're taking the massive negative cash flow hit, which hinders your borrowing capacity and availability to diversify into different income streams.
Yeah, hugely. Like, I was just chatting. I went to the beach with a friend on the weekend, and there was a couple there, and they're just traveling through Indo, surfing, cruising, and they live on the Gold Coast from Palm Beach, and that's how my friends are friends with them. And they just rent on the Gold Coast, and they've got 2 investment properties. I think they're 30 or maybe 32 or something. They got 2 investment properties. They're going to buy another one, And they're just like, yeah, we just, probably have kids soon, but like they've got 2-3 properties and they're renting. They're not focused on they live in a beautiful place. They walk to the farmers market at Palmy, every Saturday or Saturday. They walk to the Pirate Park. Like they live in a great place, but they're not stressed because they've got themselves in the market with investments, and those investments alone can continue their wealth journey without them having to add extra dollars to it.
There you go. Maybe the title of this one could be, how to make $2.7 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're the salesy.
The $2.7 million passive portfolio.
How do I enhance your net worth by $2.7 million? Jaryd Krause.
Yeah. No,
anyway, I always say, I always disclaim it because it's there's so many different elements to it, and every individual is different. But just want to sort of paint a little bit of a picture of like the power of something pretty simple, pretty passive, and what it can do to try and shift that mindset away from where the majority of Australians sit in today, where they get the loan, principal and interest, I'll pay it off, and then in 30 years I'll start thinking about, and they might even think, I'll pay it off in 10 years or 15 years. This journey doesn't happen that way because most people aren't.
Always things popping up,
Yeah, so I hope that helps. And
it's so good.
Keen for questions if you have any, if you want to put them through.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you in the next one.